So I looked into your website and your opening video talks about the ability to not create judgment around the awareness of what you're doing and how that can almost catapult you to change because you are no longer judging yourself for those actions. You're just more aware of it and being able to shift from it. And I think that concept you mentioned just in that 2-minute opening video is so important because that was a huge revelation for me.
Yeah, I think the difference is, and I see a lot of people, I'm involved in high-level leadership or training, executive coaching, that type of thing. But what I see is the people I'm working with are very intelligent. They really are. They've gone to Harvard or Stanford and are, some equivalent, and that it's gotten them the career they've wanted, and it's gotten them everything they want. But that left brain logical way of thinking has its limitations. And that, to be honest with you, that's what brought it to my attention, because they were so successful. They'd come to me and all of a sudden they'd hit this sort of, ceiling, that glass ceiling that people refer to or something. And it was like, okay, so why aren't you, what's keeping them from accessing more? And what the problem is, they've been trained and trained well to look outside of themselves for answers and solutions. And so all I really have to do is take them on an inner journey where they begin to look within themselves for answers that, and be honest with you, and they might be very hard problems that they're dealing with as opposed to soft, the more business-oriented problems that they're dealing with. But what I find is that the solution is oftentimes within themselves. In other words, they're wanting to motivate people. Well, how do you treat those people? And they recognize I'm treating them kind of how my father treated me, and not letting them feel really valued and understand they're a part of something, and, make it safe so they can contribute to it and that sort of thing. So you begin to access your thinking from not just that left logical brain, but literally integrated whole brain thinking from your heart, from your gut. Then you begin to trust that and begin to become more comfortable with that in a whole being way of responding, rather than, it's so interesting. It's almost like people have a little editor up there. It's like,
Right.
well, should I say this, or did that come out right? Or, and which means they're never present. They're always,
Yeah.
you know, and they're never trusting of who and what they are. They never really access those parts because that editor, generally it's a job the ego's been given. It's doing its job, but we have to give it a new job to breathe and be curious and present rather than monitor everything we say and do. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack here. I think it's so interesting that even though you worked with high achievers, that there's still something missing internally that they could feel, but they couldn't logically express maybe in that moment because the way of thinking to create that problem isn't the same way of thinking to kind of solve it, right? So it's so interesting to me because it makes me wonder, and maybe you can touch on this, if personality is partially shaped by your past traumas and difficulties, right? Because these high achievers, like the example you gave, it's, oh, I treated people this way because my parents treated me this way. So it's almost like, is your personality somewhat dictated by your upbringing? And if you heal from that, what is your personality at that point? Is that a higher self? Is that what they call higher self? What do you
I
think?
think it's just your authentic self. So in response to your initial point, I think we're hugely influenced by our past. I certainly was, and that's really what took me on my journey and allowed me to, discover and accept and become all that I am. And yeah, I mean, we come out of the womb needing to be, we can't even turn over. You see these little turtles run into the ocean, or a young colt an hour later, jumping around the field and having fun. Well, we can't turn over. We are absolutely helpless. And so we need connection. And that's, we gargle, we smile, we do whatever we can to get that caretaker, usually our mom, to connect with us and see that, oh, we're a human being, we're part of you. We please take care of me. And well, that's certainly appropriate and reasonable, and in terms of that intuitive response that the child has to when they're born is perfect. The problem is we continue to look outside. We have feelings when a child doesn't get what they want. For example, they tend to get angry. Whether it's a truck or a dream or whatever it might be. But so, but if your family isn't comfortable with anger, then you learn to stuff that anger away. Every child wants unconditional love more than anything else. Well, unfortunately, most of our parents are just kids themselves and don't even have any concept of accepting and loving themselves unconditionally. So they're not capable of giving us that. So we're never, any child is not getting what they truly want. And so they have to stuff down those emotions that they might have around not getting what they want. Then they look at their parents and they go, okay, well, we're not supposed to be afraid. Okay. And when we're hurt, we kind of hide that. And, I'm not supposed to get angry. So I better just, bury that one when it comes up. And we do the best we can. Sometimes we don't do that well with it bursts out. But, we end up stuffing so much of our emotional and we develop emotional backlog in our gut. I mean, my mentor, Joseph Campbell, talks about you've got to enter that cave within to find the treasure that you seek. And that cave is in your gut, and that treasure is yourself. It's that unconditional love that you've always wanted. And the only place you're ever going to get it, really, truly, is from yourself. And so, it's a journey of reconnecting with all of those parts that you set aside to be accepted as you were growing up. Look at kids when they're going to school. They dress the same, they act the same, the languaging is the same. All of that is so that we're accepted and fit in. And again, not a bad thing, but who are we? Who are you? And that's at some point, that fitting in, it might take you to some really nice levels in life, but you'll never know who and what you're really capable of, who and what you truly are, until you go on that inner journey and reconnect with, heal, and that inner child, heal that emotional backlog, become whole, quite literally, because that neurologically allows you to quiet the mind, that allows you to create new neurological connections, that gives you that whole brain integrated thinking, that give you what I call big mind thinking, where rather than trying and efforting to come up with an idea, you literally just quiet your mind and put out a request for that information and let it come in. So yes, I think we're highly influenced by our childhood, and that is the initial stages to becoming the whole authentic leader, or just a person who wants to actually know themselves. And
Yeah, so regarding consciousness, i- do we, because clearly as a newborn baby, they're barely alive, let alone conscious, making, decisions or opinions, right? So where exactly do we, whether it's the literature or whatever you've heard, where do we believe that starts to develop, and does it fully develop or does it always change? And if it, because part of me thinks, maybe consciousness fully develops when your prefrontal cortex fully develops, into your early mid-20s. But then again, consciousness can also evolve, right? So what's the journey like?
well, consciousness is really going to determine how you see, experience, and react to everything that comes into your life. So the baby, the infant, of course, that's just, it's that, what's the word they use? When animals just have these intuitive abilities, that's what we're playing on when we're infants. But consciousness, really, the basic definition is how aware of what you're thinking, what you're emotionally feeling are you? And that's how aware are you of what you're physically feeling? How aware are you of, at any given time, of what level of consciousness or awareness that you're in? That's really tells you how conscious a person you are. And so that is is relatively an infinite journey of becoming more conscious, that one that begins certainly with the self and getting to know yourself, quieting the mind so that you can discover more about who and what you're capable of, and even what you are. But it expands into, certainly as you learn to quiet the mind, develop that integrated mind so that you have higher levels of thinking, higher frequency thoughts and that type of thing. You literally begin to your awareness of not only of what you're thinking and feeling, but what others are thinking and feeling. It expands into, oh, they're me also. And that journey of expanding my sense of self, which then contains really others, it contains the planet, it becomes at a point where it contains the universe. That's all a sense of self-awareness, just redefining self as you continue to expand your consciousness. But there is a point where you dissolve beyond an awareness of self and you're dissolving into the oneness of the universe, of existence, multiverse. And that's just another level of consciousness. So it's an infinite journey that I find the most fascinating part of being alive and human on the planet. Because the more you journey into the various levels of consciousness, the more self and other aware you are in any moment in life, so that you can function on a higher, more conscious level, more supportive both for yourself and others.
I always love the topics of, when you talk about life and personal growth, you can't not talk about spirit, right? Mind, body, and spirit. It's this wholeness of what you become. And it's so interesting that you said that you said you can become whole in oneness as like the conscious being. I'm currently taking my master's in Ayurveda, so Indian medicine, and they talked about this concept called the unified field theory, which is basically just, the consciousness is almost like an ocean and we're just kind of energy sources from a bigger source. But I find all that to be interesting because you had kind of mentioned something similar to that just now. And then it almost made me realize I think there's also the exact opposite, right? When someone is super subconscious and they're not aware at all of their patterns and they're just running on autopilot day after day.
That would be unconscious.
Beyond conscious?
No, that is unconscious.
Unconscious. Yep. Right. Yeah, yeah. I think that's just equally as interesting. So, do you ever work with people like that, or do they need to be aware and ready for a change to work with them?
Yeah, a client, and she's a therapist herself, recommended somebody to me the other day, and I got on a call with him, and he would be in that unconscious category.
Gotcha.
And it was challenging to have the call
Yeah.
because, like, usually people that are somewhat self-aware, you can show them, a couple patterns, and they can go, "Oh, I see how that might have come from my childhood, or how that's affecting my life," and that type of thing. Well, this fellow really could not see. I had to had to just really drill down in there to get him to finally go, "Oh, maybe I do have emotional stuff going on.
Yeah.
Maybe if I heal that, then my entire family and work and everything, professional and personal life, wouldn't be such a big mess." And so, will he continue? I don't know. I really don't. At no point, it's the old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink thing. It's like, he definitely saw and understood what his issues were and what he needed to do. But it's also, for a lot of people, especially like that, because they're not used to looking deeper within themselves, one of the scariest things that they could possibly do. For me, all of our issues and challenges are nothing but indicators of aspects of ourselves that are ready to be healed. And so as we learn to recognize that and supportively respond to those indicators, then go breathe within and heal those aspects of ourselves so that we can become more whole and complete, authentic in ourselves. we begin to recognize that, oh, all of those challenges in my life are really gifts. They're perfectly designed to support me to look deeper, to become, more whole and complete, to really open up my heart and be able to love more fully. And that begins to shift our mindset, if you will, from one of fear, which is really what runs most everybody, to one of gratitude and appreciation. And when you're coming from that place, you've got a whole new relationship with yourself and your life. Everything that's challenging and problematic really becomes an opportunity because you're breathing. And from a place of curiosity and being present, you're seeing your best optimal next step and how to handle that. And in that relationship with yourself, as you become more accepting and exciting about, oh, I'm living in a rigged universe and it's rigged in a way that supports me. You become much more trusting of life, of yourself. But that also affects your relationships with others. So all of a sudden, these challenges and relationships that you used to have begin to smooth out because our relationship with ourselves, of course, is reflected in our relationship with others. And so that process allows us to become a whole, authentic person. So we don't have to act any certain way. We just have to be present and curious and be who we authentically are. And that allows people to trust us, and that allows people to contribute, and that allows us to create organizations that are much more, compassionate and cooperative and collaborative and those happen to be much more successful. So you're a business person, you make more money, but you also have all these people that are much happier and much more connected and supportive. So, that's the journey of becoming an authentic person. That's the journey of becoming whole and learning to love and accept yourself unconditionally. And it just, yes, it's initially a self journey, more focused on yourself, but it becomes more of one that's really integrated, with the totality of existence, whatever that vision is for yourself. You had referred earlier to there's this ocean. Well, I think we are that ocean. That's not a separate part. That's just me expanding into a much more expanded state of who and what I am, truly am. So there is literally just the oneness. And we can separate ourselves, disconnect from that as fully as we want using our mind and our fears, but we can also let go and reconnect and access our highest levels of information and trust and connection from that.
I saw this really interesting concept about the idea of how God's presence really works. And the person explaining it was talking about how that unified conscious energy is then distilled into each of us in a constraint of this 3D reality, which is time constraint, right? We're constrained to our material world, but that, portion of energy is kind of how, like, you see this ocean that you're talking about. I think, you mentioned so many interesting points. For me, a big revelation was understanding the concept you said about the world being rigged. And I think, at least for me, it was understanding that the world is rigged and neutral, and you kind of have the choice of taking, nothing's good or bad, but thinking makes it so kind of concept. And I think that's really kind of this engine behind what they call manifestation, or creating what you want, is really just kind of how you see things. So when you said seeing things as, rather than, oh man, I failed again, I was trying to eat healthy and I opened that chips bag, instead of being like that, just being like, well, this is an opportunity for learning. Why did I crave chips?
There you go.
And why that? Like, what really is it? Comfort food? Was there something in my childhood that made me feel safe and there was a trigger? There's so many things that could be under that superficial action that we're then judging ourselves and honestly self-hating and being a little too hard on ourselves, which is kind of that downward spiral, I think.
Well, what you're describing there is awareness. How conscious are you? You're describing a moment where you're conscious of what you're doing, what you're thinking. And, most people don't achieve that. They drink a liter of Pepsi and eat a bag of
Right,
chips and go on
right.
with life and do the same thing the next day, maybe, or something. But yeah, it's that moment of self-awareness, if you will. And it might just be a glimpse, but it's in those moments of self-awareness that we begin to go, oh, I can make a choice here, And, a lot of people have these very elaborate, everybody wants to be in control, for example. That's just from working with thousands of people, but when I try and get them to take a look at what their definition of control is, it often involves them stopping breathing. It really involves them shutting down and disconnecting, which, of course, that level of stress disconnects the midbrain from the higher levels of thinking and literally and neurologically. So
Wait,
all of it,
say that again. You said
well,
stress.
when you're under any levels of stress, significant or even notable levels of stress, your chemical gates between your midbrain and your higher brain, the cortex, begin to diminish. The connections, the chemical gates shut down, and to whatever degree is relevant to the stress level. And so you don't have access to your higher levels of thinking. So when they begin to recognize, oh, my definition of control is actually a great definition of being completely out of control. So it's like that's a mindset shift for them. It's like, oh, I want to be in control, but my definition of being in control is really out of control. So what do I have to do to be in control? Oh, okay, I have to breathe. I have to be curious and connected to what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. I have to be present. Well, it turns out that's the main goal in life, is to breathe, be curious and present, because then you'll always have the ability to be aware of what your next best step is.
This idea of presence is something I think so many strive for, but there's so many external things that kind of can just, push you one way or another. I mean, you must know, you've worked with so many people. There's people make countless excuses as to why they can't do something or one thing or another. And it kind of reminds me of what you had said earlier, going back to this idea of fear. And to me, it almost seems like fear is ultimately it all distills down to fear of death, right? Because if you distill any level of fear, it usually can be pinpointed to, I'm going to be alone, I'm going to die alone, I'm going to be, this fear of just being alone or dying. What's interesting to me is I wonder if it's not even just fear of death, but more so fear of death at that moment and not getting a chance to become authentic. Almost as if, I mean,
Never
that's why
heard
you
of it.
see, right. It's like, it almost makes sense, right? You see the people talk about their life flashing before their eyes, or people do deep introspection on times of, critical moments of their life, health wise. So it's really, what's your thoughts? I think that's pretty interesting idea.
I think, our biggest fear also is of change. And of course, I think that's very connected to the big change when we die, because we don't know what, some of us do, but most people don't know what happens when we die. And so, I teach breathing. Breathing to me that's my personal guide. That's my trusted spiritual teacher. That'll take me into and through whatever is, coming into my life, so that I can heal and transform it into the best of who and what I am. So, exploration that I share with people is begin to count your breath as you breathe in. Maybe count up to 4 or 10 as you breathe in, and then hold your breath to the count of 15. Exhale to the count of 5 or 10 or whatever, and then hold your breath out to the count of 15 or 20 or whatever. Well, what happens is, the more, when we're holding our breath in and counting, our fear of expansion comes up for us, or our fear of being more. And so that's also a discomfort. Our fear when when we're holding our breath out, that's when we run into our fear of real death, physical death. And so what I
You
do
said
is,
fear of expansion?
yeah, fear of becoming all that we're capable of being, fear of, of getting out of that little subconscious zone of, that we identify.
When the breath is being held?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So, I mean, you can get it to the point where you're holding in to the count of 50 and holding out to the count of 50. And what you're going to run into is like, oh, well, I can always take a breath. So I don't have to be afraid I'm actually going to die or I'm actually going to. You know. And so you do those exercises, and the breath really allows you to expand your experience of life. You don't have to be so afraid of, well, 10 breaths, and if I don't breathe now, I'm going to die, in or out. You can expand your experience of life. And so as you expand and move into and get comfortable, move beyond your fear of death, of course, then you expand and move beyond your fear of living. And that
Yeah.
allows you to become you.
Now that you say all this, it kind of makes sense why I loved swimming so much when I was a kid.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
huge mindfulness practice. I mean, you can't you're disconnected from everything. You're underwater. All you have is your thoughts and your heartbeat. That's all you hear. Maybe occasionally someone hits you while you're doing laps, but you know, uh, you come up for it's the same thing. You hold your breath, and you practice holding your breath longer and longer. Makes you faster. So yeah, I mean, it's literally everything you talked about.
Yeah. I love hearing that. I have a very precious story that I don't tell. It's just a precious story for me is that I was probably maybe 12 and I lived near a lake, and especially in the summer, I discovered you could swim through the lily pads and follow the bass and the catfish in the water. And it was in that silence, in that present moment and enjoying nature to the fullest like that. I really got addicted to it. It really was like, wow. Well, I would practice holding my breath so that I could do it more. But I noticed I never told my friends what I was doing because it was weird. It was odd,
Right.
wouldn't be normal or something. But yeah, that's exactly where I began my journey into the breath was in those magnificent moments as a child, feeling the oneness of nature. And yeah, so love to hear that you got that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best things in life are out of the normal, you know? You know what I mean?
I do
I don't
know.
know. I've never understood this whole concept of normal. It goes back to the idea that you were talking about wanting to fit in, right? I think from an evolutionary perspective, we don't want to be alienated from the tribe. Otherwise,
Yeah.
our sense of survival is at risk. Hmm.
I mean, for me, the biggest gift it was the worst year, but the best year of my life was I was a rowing champion, but my grades at college just really sucked. I mean, terrible.
But you were good at rowing.
My expertise was looking out the window. But yeah, but I was a really good rower, but I couldn't stay in college because my grades just weren't high enough. And so it was Vietnam War time, and so you had to go in the service. So I went in the Marine Corps. In my brilliant 19-year-old little mind, they threw up a silhouette of a human being rather than the bullseye target one morning. And I just, it's like really, I literally jumped up without any thought and threw my rifle down because I realized, oh, I wasn't becoming one of the best at the sporting event of shooting at targets. I was becoming one of the best at killing other people. And wow, that just disrupted my whole life pattern because the Marine Corps was a little bit aggressive with me for the next week or so.
I bet.
They didn't care for my attitude, but I really, it allowed me to begin to reframe all that I'd been taught, all that I'd been told was right or wrong, or that I should believe, or what my values might be. I just pushed all of those aside and said, I need to really restructure my life and find out who I am. I didn't do well, to be honest with you. I got to a place within a couple of years, my life was a mess. But, and I I literally tried to commit suicide, and it wasn't a vain attempt. It was out in the middle of the woods with a hunting knife coming full force towards my heart. And to jump back to earlier comments we were talking about, that might be one of the most amazing moments of my life, because I had said something about, God, if there's, if you have anything to say, this might be a good moment, before I plunge that big knife in my heart. But of course,
Right.
there's silence other than
Yeah, you're
chipmunk.
like, are you listening? Like nothing.
And yet, just as that hunting knife is coming and literally pierced the skin, all of a sudden I dissolved in this white ball of light. And I'm like 19, 20, well, I was about 22 at that time. And this is not my reality. I wasn't into spirituality in that kind of sense. So I dissolved in this white ball of light and just was immersed in the perfection of life, immersed in the oneness, literally immersed in the oneness of existence. And, it's not like when I came out of that, I have no idea how long that lasted, but when I came out of it, the knife was, quite a ways away. But it gave me a reference for what I wanted to discover. How do I recreate that? How do I experience that oneness? And that really became my life. And of course, with that intention, I was able to accomplish that, and really became my life. That's what I taught. I had centers in Switzerland and America, and I did a lot of about 30,000 hours of meditation and all those types of.
Wow.
But at this point, I'm just learning it's like, how do you take all of that expanded level of consciousness and turn it into a way of living and working in the world? For me, I see high level leadership, conscious leadership. Those people can have the most, I would say, not only lasting effect, but the deepest effect on our world, on our society. And so I happen to have this really unique ability, probably because I've been doing it all my life, of helping people, move into those higher levels of consciousness, which that happens to be exactly high level leaders are more conscious people. And so, if I can move enough people into those levels of consciousness, then maybe we can create a more conscious and caring world. That's my little sneaky way of going through life.
Yeah, I think part of the conscious leader is also being conscious, or I guess partially conscious of your social interactions, right? Because a leader has to guide people, and being aware of social interactions you can better navigate how to
Absolutely.
deal with people. It even reminds me of back when I first started my career. I remember there was this language barrier between me and a coworker, and I think she took something the wrong way at me and another coworker. And I remember coming up to him and I was like, "Is she mad at us?" And he goes, "No, no, dude, you're thinking too much." And I was like, "All right." And lo and behold, like 3 days later, she just blows up out of nowhere and she's like, "Are you guys making fun of me?" And I was like, I looked at him and I go, "I told you." And and we settled it right there. And it was, obviously a misunderstanding. But I find that so interesting because I think, or maybe it's because most people are in their own heads that they don't pick up on social nuances. Is that part of it?
Well, you have to become self-aware. And self-awareness can't happen unless you take that inner journey and really reconnect with your inner child and heal and become whole through that process. And that allows you to become more self-aware, but it also, people talk about emotional intelligence. Well, you can learn to be emotionally intelligent, to act emotionally intelligent. But if you get into a push, a situation that's difficult, you're going to respond back to your defensive, fear-based reaction. So to become emotionally intelligent, you have to become self-aware. Become self-aware, you have to explore all of your own emotions and not only recognize, but heal them. And that allows you to become more sensitive and more compassionate and empathetic, not only with yourself, but with others. And that's the emotional intelligence that you need, especially in a workplace, because you have to be aware of really where is everybody? How are they doing? Or do they feel like they're part of this? Do they feel like a valued member? A leader today, I mean, we're talking even a few years ago, with much more top-down, control, dominant sort of role.
Micromanaging too.
Yeah, yeah. But now it's all about bringing out the best in everyone. That's really what leadership is becoming. And I had a fellow. He had 5 9-figure businesses. I'm a very successful
Wow.
entrepreneur. Yeah, but he was definitely in that top-down micromanaging mode. And years, I'd learned it from his dad. But things started falling apart, as they will if you push hard enough. His grown adult kids were disconnecting from him. The love of his life was leaving him. The businesses were, you know, having risk of being unsuccessful. And I mean, within months of him literally discovering and becoming more self-aware and falling in love with himself, he began to restructure his businesses. And within months, we saw the results, but within a year, he had more than doubled the value of several of those organizations. So if you're in business to make money and you're going, well, I gotta be tough. I gotta be this. I gotta be controlling. No, you've got to be present and conscious. You have to become more aware, because those organizations clearly, in like 50 years of leadership research, will show those organizations that are more conscious, collaborative, and cooperative increase their values by at least 40% and their profits by 40%. And that, my clients are kind of laugh at that because they're doing even much better. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting because this, so just to clarify, you can be emotionally intelligent and not conscious, correct? Or because is one the prerequisite to the other?
You got it.
Okay. But can it be the
It's not like they're separate things.
right,
You're
right.
becoming more self-aware. You're becoming more present. You're becoming more emotionally intelligent. We're
Gotcha.
all part of the journey. They're all connected, and that's the journey of becoming more. The journey of becoming self-aware and emotionally intelligent is a journey of opening up your heart and mind, quite literally. So, I mean, you're a better thinker. You're a better feeler. You're a better everything.
Yeah.
You're a better you.
Right.
And that's what being more conscious is that awareness of self and other.
And I would even say another very strong benefit is that intuitive sense you get from the gut-brain connection. And you had mentioned this at the beginning of the episode very lightly, and I wanted to touch on it, but it's huge in the anthropology space. We talk about the gut-brain connection, the axis all the time. I think it's quite underrated. I mean, it truly can save your life. I had a time when I was right. I remember going to the mall once to make some returns, and it was a gloomy, dark day. And logically, I just looked around. I was like, I don't know. I just don't feel like today's the day to shop around or look around. So I literally returned my items and just went right back to my car, went home. But logically in my head, I was like, oh, it looks like it's going to rain. I think, it just doesn't look good day. 30 minutes later, there was a massive shooting and like a lot of people got hurt. Some people, didn't make it. And that was really eye-opening to me how, I don't know. I mean, I think there is that intuitive sense sometimes that can't be explained. Coincidence, maybe, but
you're more aware. And
yeah,
awareness, when sometimes people talk about being very present and they think it's, oh, I'm going to focus on this one little thing and not, have any awareness or thought about anything else. And that's really not being present. Being present is, yes, you have that single pointed focus, whatever that idea or, activity you're in, but you also have this very expanded awareness, that is in the set timeless and spatially, open to all of experience. So
interesting.
awareness is and consciousness are, it's a it's a
Yeah,
much more expanded, I don't know, experience than just that,
is
experience yourself, I guess would be a way to say it.
do we think consciousness arises from the gut? I mean, I think from my understanding, there is neurons that we found in the microbiomes of our gut linings and stuff, right? So could we potentially say that consciousness, at least in part, there is some sort of strong connection there, if not the source from?
That's in my work. That's what I'm doing all the time. There's a lot of neurological similarities to neurons in the gut and in the heart and in the brain. They're all part of the brain. I mean, that's pretty current research, relatively
Right.
speaking. But the brain is not just this little unit up there. It is, and if I've dissected bodies, you can see there's a big cable that connects them all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really a matter of the process of becoming more self-aware and emotionally intelligent and conscious is accessing all of who and what you are, which certainly means, getting in touch with those emotions, tearing, getting all that armor that we put around our heart to protect ourselves as a child, disassembling that armor so that we can have an open heart. I'm of an age, and I'm working with people who are of an age where I see that all that armor they put around their heart, well, it might have been the perfect thing for them to do as a child, is now literally killing them. And so they have to tear that art down. I mean, I get people who have, life-threatening disorders and diseases. That's not necessarily why they're coming to me, but they're aware that they need to get their shit together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And be stressed and a bunch of other things. And they see those disorders, those life-threatening challenges dissolve, go away, because they're the result of stress, they're the result of, that disconnection within ourselves.
Going back to your life-changing story in your 20s, that's such a powerful story because it's I forgot who said this. It might have been, I can't even remember, but somebody said there was like only a handful of very pivotal moments in your life that are truly so life-changing that, what do you call them, like anchor points that like really do define parts of your life. And it seems like though that was one of, a few that you probably have had. It makes me curious, since you started your journey from that age and so young, over time, has it gotten any clearer of the world around you, or is it just yourself? Like this
Well,
journey?
clear.
Yeah, you think so?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it seems
I
like the
mean,
journey is more introspective.
well, initially it's introspective, but then it becomes very expansive. You know, you,
How so?
well, the initial journey is looking within yourself and healing, getting this mechanism more connected so that it can expand. And, so initially you're looking within yourself. It's all about healing yourself, you know, all the different aspects of yourself, your past, and, physiologically, neurologically, emotionally, psychologically, of course. And so, yeah, it's all about really healing those. And then it becomes more about other. Everybody who goes through my work, quite literally, and I'm sure it's true for others who do this similar work, is, initially the focus is on them. But by the time they are healed, and their focus is on others, how do I make the world a better place for others? I've got one client who now, is trying to figure out how, and doing a great job with it, redesigning the educational system in India. I've got other people looking at, well, how do we take AI and make it so that it becomes part of conscious living, not something that we're afraid of. And we've got people who are, that one fellow, I said, he's got a few thousand people to work for him. Well, before they were all sort of frightened and controlled and contracted. And now, I mean, I've worked with several of them. They've become the CEOs of those organizations. And their life has just expanded tremendously, not only with the people they work with, but, their personal lives, their families, you know, their kids, everything gets better.
It really does. When you work on yourself, your mind, body, and spirit, it does translate to just about every area of your life because you are the one experiencing those areas. And I love that answer because I'm currently 26. I just turned 26, and I've been on this, personal growth and then spirituality, consciousness, like this whole journey from 4 or 5 years plus. And it's interesting that you say all this because it's only just now that I feel comfortable and wanting and willing to help other people because it took me so long to heal and do my own issues and go through all that. So I think that answer is very powerful because I think once you've done the inner work, now you become more expansive to help other people do the inner work.
Well, and the truth is that your inner work continues, but in relationship to helping others. I mean, a lot of times somebody will go through my initial program and they go, "Oh, I want to do that again." I go, "No, now take it outside of yourself. What's your highest intention? What are you aspiring to? What's your greatest aspiration? What do you have to breathe into and let go of to become what you envision that you'd like to create?" And that's the more that their focus shifts to caring, taking care of, empowering others, the more ongoing continued growth, the challenges that they might have, the easier it is to handle those because you've got this bigger vision, this higher intention. And so these little things kind of just get handled in that process. A high level leader is really, they are people who have, their life has become a mindful experience. It doesn't matter what aspect of their life you're talking about, whether how they're parenting, how they communicate, how they make love, how they work with people in the office, that type of thing. Everything is a mindful experience. If they play golf, they're not out there competing against anybody else. It's how present can I be in my mind, body, spirit in this putt, in this, swing, in this, and, that's how they judge their game. Not judging in a critical way, but, that's the enjoyment of the game for them. But it's that mindfulness, and their lives do become incredibly mindful, examples of mindful living. But they also recognize that while that allows them to continue to gently expand their level of consciousness, that it's significant, having significant transformational experiences on somewhat of a regular basis that allows them to take that level of consciousness up into a whole new strata. Your comfort zone is really just, for most people, well, for everybody, to be honest with you, but they only like to be so conscious. They'll do a 3-week workshop or a 1-day workshop and go, "I'm feeling great, everything's good," and so that's their high. That's, then
I'm healed.
yeah. Then of course they sabotage that and they have the Pepsi and the chips,
Right.
bring themselves down. But they also have a low. It's like, well, my life just sucks. I've got to do something with my life, and it's that strata of consciousness that is their comfort zone. So the goal is to really get people to, to move out of that defined strata, to make their high, expanding it into higher levels of consciousness rather than just that minimal temporary level of consciousness. I've been teaching meditation for about 50 years, and it's so interesting. I'll be talking to somebody, go, "Oh yeah, I meditate every day," and like, and then I, without thinking, but I go, "Well, how long you meditate?" 5, 10 minutes. I go, "I've been meditating for 50 years." And every 10 minutes, I'm just getting into it.
Yeah, right. That's the warm up.
I'm still doing some breathing or chanting or something. But, even 20 minutes, and that's kind of the max where people will tend to go. That's when your mind is just starting to get quiet. And that's when your meditation is actually starting.
Yeah. And I think that time gets shorter, correct? The longer you do it and the better you get at meditating, the ability to
Time to
quiet
get into it.
your mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely 20 minutes plus when you start.
Yeah. You
Do
can
what?
do it in a breath when you get really
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah. Go ahead.
I learned transcendental meditation, TM, and that's more of the chanting to kind of put yourself in a transcendent state.
A friend of mine, John Gray, he introduced me to that years and years ago. Yeah,
Really?
he's a
Did you
famous,
do what?
he's a famous author. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus author, and so yeah, I remember him teaching me that. That was good.
Yeah, that's been a very good level of meditation for me. Definitely also just mindfulness practices are very important. I think that can also be a form of meditation. I remember when I did anthropology research in Kenya, there was no internet, no nothing. My phone screen time every day was about 5 minutes, and that was just for taking photos on my camera. When you have nothing and you just detach from the world just like that, I spent a lot of time just alone, sitting, thinking, and laying down. And I didn't think of that as meditation at the time. And it wasn't until maybe a couple years later I was able to connect those dots that is also a version of meditation. It was just, bringing awareness and just letting go of thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, meditation is, there's people that whirl in circles and people who look at something or chant something or, a
Yeah.
myriad of variations.
Apps now.
Yeah, right. The common thing in meditation is that there's a single pointed focus. For me, it's my breath. For other people, it might be something different. But yeah, so if you're sitting there around the fire at night and you're staring into the fire, then you kind of realize you're not thinking. That's a nice level of meditation, So, yeah, it's just that single pointed focus, and that can happen at any and all times throughout your day. Yeah,
Absolutely. So we're on this show's called Learn or Be Learned. So I love to ask my guests for a closing question, what is a lesson that you either learned from someone or you want the audience to learn from your journey that you'd like to share today?
Our educational system, and I've been a university instructor, so I'm been wholeheartedly involved and support it. But it does train us to rely on a very minuscule aspect of who and what we are. And so you have to really begin to go on your own inner journey, your own hero or heroine's journey, if you will, and discover what you're really capable of, who you're capable of being. And the biggest gift that we have that connects us to all of who and what we are, all of existence, is our breath. Learn to breathe. Learn to breathe and discover where that breath can guide you. Discover when you're feeling an emotion and not knowing how to deal with it. Breathe into it, look underneath it, and see what's really triggering that. Breathe into that and heal it. And in healing it, you'll access the very parts you need so that you can move forward powerfully in your life. Learn to breathe. Be kind to yourself. Be kind enough to breathe and be present with yourself.
Yeah, I think the idea, it's so interesting, right? We go to school and learn so many things, except the few things that truly can fundamentally transform your life, such as breathing, right? And it's so simple. We think I don't need to be taught how to breathe. But like you said, anger has a different breathing response. Sorrow has a different breathing response. Some is shallow, some are deep, right? Some are quick. So your breath is really a regulator for whatever you're expressing. So almost if you can backwards, construct that or reverse engineer that, you're looking at the breath instead of the emotion, which almost then manipulates the emotion, or at least subsides it, right? I'm angry, I start breathing, it disappears or dissipates. I think that's a incredible closing statement. Breathing is definitely a skill to learn. I think I got introduced to it through Wim Hof at first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what connects us to ourselves. It's what connects us to the world, to the universe. I mean, if I'm breathing and when I exhale, the trees and the plants take in that CO2. That's what they need to breathe in. Then when they exhale the oxygen that I need to breathe in. And so there's this interplay of nature and self and the world, the universe, if you will, that comes out of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember even when I learned that throughout biology, just how fascinating the world truly is and how beautifully it's constructed in balance, from microcosms to macrocosms. But anyways, Ron, thank you so much for being on this show. I think the audience is going to get so much out of this, and I appreciate it.
And well, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.